Hey everybody, how's it going? So today we're going to be talking about overdrives. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually show you how I run my drive section on my pedal board and talk through all the different pedals I use and how I run them and everything. And then I'm actually going to plug a drive pedal straight into my amp, and I'm actually going to dial it in on camera for you so you can see how I would approach dialing in a drive pedal from a clean slate and just kind of doing it from scratch, and that might help give you an idea of how I would approach setting up a new drive pedal on your board. Alright, real quick, I'm going to go ahead and interrupt myself. Two things I forgot to mention while filming this video that I want you to be thinking about throughout the whole video is, first of all, if you look back at my first video, one of the things I mentioned was clean tone, and clean tone is one of the most important things when it comes to building your drive section. So I would definitely say make sure that your clean tone is solid and where you want it to be before you start dialing in your drives. And then the second thing is, oftentimes less gain is better. So if you watch this video, a lot of what I play is going to sound similar when I'm switching between drives, but just kind of be thinking about the fact that sometimes less is better, and it's more about how you approach stacking drives or using them or looking at them as different flavors and stuff like that. So just two things I want to throw in there real quick before we get too far on this video. Alright, so I've got my board right here. For my drive section, I'm running a Klon KTR, a JHS Superbolt, and a Analog Man King of Tone. So for me, the order of these pedals, it goes Superbolt, King of Tone, and then KTR. And so most people like to run the lower gain drive pedals first, and then they build into the higher gain ones. For me, I do that for the most part, except I actually have my Klon last. And the reason for that is, for me, I leave the Klon on all the time, and I personally like the way that affects my tone and kind of colors it a little bit. So I actually want my other drive pedals to push that drive circuit. And so that's one of those things you kind of got to think about, is the order of the pedals. Just simply rearranging your drive pedals can completely change the tones you get out of them and the way that they respond to your playing. So one important thing to note is that I actually do run my overdrives before my volume pedal, and the reason I do that is that way when I swell into chords and notes and stuff, my signal is already fully overdriven, and all I'm controlling with my volume pedal is the amount of volume. I'm not actually controlling the level of gain. So by doing that, it makes my signal more consistent, and if I were to have my drive pedals after my volume pedal, as I swell, I'm actually going to be increasing gain as well, which I don't want to do because it's going to make my tone very inconsistent. And one other important thing is that I do run a compressor, and I leave it on all the time. It's underneath my pedal board, and that is going to change your drive tone a little bit. It's going to, in my opinion, it's going to clean it up a little bit, smooth it out, and it's also going to make the volumes and everything more consistent in there as well. So compression is a whole nother topic, and we'll probably talk about that later, but that is important to note that I do leave that on all the time. So I'm going to play my clean tone first with no drive pedals on at all, and then I'm going to go through all my different settings so you can kind of see how I run things. And then here's the bridge pickup. So now if I turn on my KTR, this is what I leave on all the time. You'll see how this changes my tone here. And so I run this super light. It just adds a little bit of gain, just a tiny little bit, as well as a little bit of sparkle on the high end. Now I'm going to actually turn on the Superbolt. So I have this pedal set more as a mid boost, and I'll kind of explain to you how I use that. Most of the time I actually stack it with the KTR, and I'll show you what that sounds like. First I'll show you it by itself, but the mid boost sound is actually going to help me to kind of warm up my signal, and it's also going to help me to sometimes cut through the mix more, because mids are what cut in the mix of a song. So those mid frequencies are going to stick out more and help your whatever notes you're playing to be more prevalent in the mix. So here's the middle. And it's super light, but you'll hear a big difference when I stack it. And here's the bridge. So when I turn on the KTR, that's where you're going to hear the big difference. So here's the middle. And the bridge. So turning that off again so you can hear just the KTR. And then back on. So it's just adding some more mids in there, which is really making it cut, and it has a little bit more punch to it. And the big thing is I'll use this like for even more mellow parts. And so let me show you what that would sound like. So I'm gonna play something kind of chill and ambient. I'm gonna play it first with the Super Bowl off and then with it on so you can hear the difference. So now if I click this on, you're gonna hear it's gonna warm up and it's gonna be a lot fatter and bigger sounding. And so to me, that mid boost is making it sound a lot fatter and warmer, and it's really adding another dynamic level to my guitar playing. And one thing I do want to kind of say right here is this is just how I run stuff. By no means is this like the way that you should necessarily do it or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying at all. I just got a lot of questions about how I run my drives, and so I'm showing you how I do it. There's definitely tons of different ways you can do this, and this is just one method and one approach to looking at it. Alright, so now I'm going to show you my kind of higher gain drives. And so I will use just the KTR and the Super Bowl for bigger lead lines. And I'll actually show you what that sounds like real quick. So if I'm playing a big lead line or something, that sounds nice and big. Now what I'll do is I actually will hit on the king of tone, and that actually adds another level of gain, and so that's my next gain stage. And I will actually stack all three of them like that sometimes. First, let me show you what it sounds like just the king of tone. So just the king of tone sounds like this. So it sounds pretty good. It's not very heavy, but once I start stacking stuff, so if I play a big lead line like this now, and so it is a little hot, and it's a little almost crispy, but I will say that in the context of a mix with a band, that's going to cut really well, versus if I'm sitting here playing by myself in my room, it can sound a little bit too much. So that's one of those things, is you have to look at it from the perspective of a live situation and a live mix versus just sitting at home, because sometimes sitting at home, what you're playing might not translate from what you're doing live, and vice versa. So that's something that if I was sitting at home here playing, I probably wouldn't run it that hot just because I don't love the way that that sounds. But in the context of a mix and a live situation, that works really well for me personally. It may not work for everybody, but running it like that works for me. So sometimes the other option is I can hit the drive side. So this side is a boost, and then this side is a tube screamer. So I can hit this and it's going to sound big too. So that by itself, it's like almost completely dead. And that's because for this, I almost never run it by itself. And so I dialed it in with these pedals in context. Sometimes you have to think about practically how you're going to do stuff, and it's going to change how you dial stuff in. For me, I would never use this by itself. I would always stack it with the other pedals. So that's just a really brief overview of how I run my drives. I don't want to spend too much time talking about my board. What I want to do is I want to actually go and dial in a drive pedal on camera so you can see how I'd approach dialing one in. But just to recap, KTR I leave on all the time. I run it as kind of like a lighter drive, just to kind of color my tone and kind of get my clean tone of the punch that I want. Super Bowl I run more as a mid boost, and I use it to fatten up my tone and give me that extra punch that I need to cut through the mix. And then the KTR I run as my higher gain stuff, so for bigger lead lines and even sometimes really big rhythm sounds. I'll hit one of these sides and usually stack it, so that will give me the punch and the mids and everything that I need to cut through the mix for a really big lead line, and it's gonna kind of be the biggest sound that I have. So for this, I'm just plugged straight into my Kemper. I have it pretty much how I would have my clean tone set, so I can play in the middle position and it's pretty clean. But I can go to my bridge pickup and kind of dig into it, and it's going to get a little bit of drive and grit. And then right here I have a JHS Morning Glory, which is a more transparent overdrive. It's modeled after what they call a blues breaker circuit, but this is going to be a drive that you could use for kind of all kinds of different stuff. You could use it for lighter gain stuff all the way to probably even some bigger lead sounds. Basically, how I would start out dialing in a drive is I'd probably start with everything pretty much at noon. The first thing you want to do is you want to find unity gain, and so what that means is the volume when the pedal's on versus when the pedal's off is going to be the same. So right now, if I play with it off, that's my volume. If I click it on, it's pretty much the same. So, and so now I know this pedal is unity with pretty much everything at noon, and then I'm gonna go from there and start dialing stuff in. So usually what you want to do is you want to run more volume and less gain. So my goal is not to get a lot of gain, my goal is to push the amp to break up. So what I would do is I'd probably start maybe turning down the drive a little bit and then upping the volume a little and see what that does. And so now I've lost unity, so I need to make sure to get it back to unity. So it actually does need a little bit more volume. And so I'm also going to kind of think about what I want the pedal to do for me. So if I want it to be a higher gain drive, then obviously I'm going to sit here and I'm probably going to run a little bit more gain. But if it's going to be a drive that I'm going to stack with other stuff, or going to be a lower, first or second stage gain, a first or second stage drive pedal, I'm going to try and keep it a little more mild. So now it's got a little bit of grit. I'm actually going to turn it up a little bit more here, and maybe give it a little bit of drive. Let's see what that sounds like. So I'm literally just going to sit here and play with it until I kind of get it dialed in the way I want. But the biggest thing I'd say when dialing in drives is don't be afraid to just turn up the volume and turn down the drive. A lot of people think that you're kind of not accomplishing anything when you do that, but the reality is you're actually accomplishing more because you're keeping your clean signal intact, and you're going to keep more clarity in all of your notes and everything you're playing by running less gain. Gain is going to kind of be your enemy a lot of the time. It's going to kind of I'm not saying gain is bad necessarily, but gain is really going to muddy up your signal, and you're better off, in my opinion, dialing in your drives to work together better so that you can run them all with lower gain and then kind of stack them to get the gain you need for bigger parts. If you do have a drive pedal that you can dial in to have more gain and still keep that clarity, then that's great. But for me, just what I found with at least the pedals that I run, I start to lose clarity when I start to bump up the gain. So I usually just prefer to stack things. So now this is sounding pretty good. I'm gonna dial in a little bit more high end. All right, so that's sounding pretty good. Basically, the key to this is running more volume and less gain. And so by doing that, I'm maintaining clarity in my signal, and it's a lot more organic sounding. So if I do the opposite, where I start turning this up here, let's go ahead and turn up the drive, and then I'm going to turn the volume down because it's going to get loud. So see how that's a lot less clear? It's really, really muddy, and it's gonna really make it hard to hear all the clarity and definition of everything you're playing. So by doing that the opposite way and dialing this back, dialing this up, I still got all the gain I need, but it's maintaining that clarity. Like I said, there's no one way in particular of doing this. This is just how I do it, and that's why I wanted to keep this video short, just so that you can kind of see how I do things. I hope this video helped you. If it did, make sure to share it, comment, all that stuff. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.